FTX co-founder Sam Bankman-Fried will spend the rest of his life in jail. The judge overseeing Bankman-Fried's case revoked his $250 million bail package, arguing that he could be tampering with witnesses. He will remain in the Metropolitan Detention Center until his trial starts in October. Despite his plea not to speak with the media, Bankman-Fried has violated his bail conditions on several occasions. He recently spoke with a reporter about his ex-girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, who is expected to testify against him. FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried will remain in jail despite a bail appeal. A man who was once hailed as a crypto visionary and hired celebrities like Tom Brady and Shaquille O'Neal to promote his businesses will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Sam Bankman-Fried, who was accused of overseeing a multi-billion-dollar fraud at his FTX crypto exchange, has lost a bid to be released from jail ahead of his October trial. U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan ruled that the disgraced ex-financial mogul isn't likely to comply with his bail conditions and can't be trusted not to interfere with his case by talking to witnesses. Federal prosecutors accused Bankman-Fried of using customer funds from the collapsed FTX exchange to pay debts at his hedge fund Alameda Research, purchase luxury real estate and donate millions to political campaigns. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges but admits that he made poor risk management decisions. But he also has been accused of interfering with his case by sending hundreds of emails and making over 1,000 calls to journalists. He has been allowed to travel to a federal courthouse twice a week for meetings with his lawyers but complained that the lack of internet access at the facility is preventing him from reviewing evidence stored on the internet to prepare for his defense. During the hearing, lawyers for Bankman-Fried tried to argue that his detention is not necessary because he has yet to tamper with any witnesses. But Kaplan dismissed the argument, saying that there is probable cause to believe that the former FTX CEO has attempted to tamper with witnesses at least twice since his arrest in December 2022. Earlier this month, he moved from his parents' home in Palo Alto, California to a cell at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center. He was remanded to custody immediately following his hearing and will remain there until the start of his trial on October 3rd. He faces up to 110 years in prison if convicted. His attorney Kevin O'Brien tells Decrypt he is confident the 61-year-old will prevail on appeal. He has already filed an emergency motion to delay the trial until March 2024. He'll go on trial on October 3rd. FTX co-founder Sam Bankman-Fried will spend the duration of his trial in jail after a judge denied his request to be temporarily released ahead of his October 3rd trial. The U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan ruled that the former CEO should stay in Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, after he violated bail conditions. He is accused of committing a series of fraud-related offenses, including wire fraud, securities fraud, commodities fraud, and campaign finance violations. During his hearing Thursday, Kaplan said that prosecutors had demonstrated that Bankman-Fried posed a flight risk due to his alleged attempts to tamper with witnesses in the case. He cited his attempt to contact a potential witness via encrypted message and his use of a virtual private network to subvert monitoring as evidence. In addition, he shared the private writings of his ex-girlfriend Caroline Ellison to the New York Times, which could sully her reputation and influence prospective jurors for the case. Prosecutors argued that Bankman-Fried's actions were an obvious attempt to discredit Ellison, who has agreed to testify against him in exchange for a lenient sentence. They also argued that his actions were a violation of his plea agreement in which he agreed to not engage in any illegal activities. The prosecutors also noted that Bankman-Fried's sharing of Ellison's personal writings could have a chilling effect on other potential witnesses who could fear personal humiliation and efforts to discredit their reputation beyond what would be permitted in court. His lawyers argued that his bail terms were not being violated. They said that their client deserved to be able to prepare for each day's witnesses and testimony, which would be difficult to do if he had to return to MDC at the end of every court session. They also argued that their client's trial could last up to a week and a half, which means they'll need to be able to confer with him regularly. While many headlines suggest that Bankman-Fried faces up to 110 years in prison if he's found guilty of all the charges, the reality is much more complicated. Jordan Estes, a partner at Kramer Levin, told CoinDesk that most of the crimes the DOJ is alleging are similar, so it's not clear how much time he would get if convicted on all counts. He'll testify against his ex-girlfriend Caroline Ellison. One of the most interesting things about Sam Bankman-Fried's media blitz ahead of his arrest was the extent to which he seemed to be placing blame for his massive cryptocurrency fraud on a former lover, Caroline Ellison. In a filing this week, prosecutors provided the clearest picture yet of how they'll use her testimony at his trial in October. In the 70-page court filing, prosecutors say they intend to turn several members of Bankman-Fried's inner circle against him, including Ellison. She's expected to testify that he encouraged her to move client funds from FTX to his affiliated fund, Alameda Research, so that he could use them for himself and others. She allegedly did so even though she knew that her actions could hurt investors and the firm's reputation. The government also says that Bankman-Fried sullied Ellison's reputation by sharing excerpts from her private diary entries penned in a Google Doc with a reporter at the New York Times. In doing so, they argued, he was trying to discredit her and advance his defense in the media outside of the constraints of the courtroom and rules of evidence. They added that it tampered with the integrity of her case and made her seem like a jilted lover who perpetrated these crimes alone. Bankman-Fried's lawyers didn't deny that he shared the diary with the reporter, but they argued that doing so didn't violate his bail terms. They said he was simply trying to protect her from a negative press response and that she had already been publicly humiliated in the press. They said they were surprised to learn of prosecutors' request for his jail sentence, which they argued should have been suspended while he appealed his conviction. They also argued that he wouldn't be allowed to visit any witnesses in jail and that he was already having trouble accessing his parents' home where he was staying under house arrest. A hearing on the matter is scheduled for next month, and if he loses his appeal, a federal judge will send him to prison. He faces up to 110 years in prison on a slew of charges related to the collapse of FTX and the fraud that followed. He'll face up to 110 years in prison. The disgraced crypto mogul's trial on 7 fraud and conspiracy counts tied to the collapse of FTX and its associated hedge fund, Alameda Research, is set to begin next week. He could face up to 110 years in prison if found guilty of the charges. The disgraced financier has been accused of cheating FTX customers out of billions of dollars while casting himself as a savior of the industry. On Thursday, U.S. prosecutors unveiled new fraud charges against him. Bankman-Fried, 31, was initially released on $250 million bail in August, allowing him to live with his parents in California until the start of his trial. However, 2 weeks ago he was rearrested after prosecutors claimed he violated bail conditions by sharing private writings by Caroline Ellison, his former ex-girlfriend and the former chief executive of one of his businesses, Alameda Research, with a New York Times reporter. The prosecution said Bankman-Fried wanted to sully Ellison's reputation and influence potential jurors at his October trial. The prosecutors also claimed that Bankman-Fried was trying to intimidate witnesses. The defense team argued that the government's claims were overblown and denied any wrongdoing. However, the judge ruled that he would remain in jail for the rest of the trial. As the decision was read, Bankman-Fried fidgeted but didn't appear to react. The lawyer for the 31-year-old said his client was not guilty of a crime and should not be punished for seeking to protect his reputation. He also claimed that a lack of internet access at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center was hampering his ability to review evidence for his case. The U.S. District Court judge overseeing the case, Lewis Kaplan, has granted prosecutors motions to block Bankman-Fried's proposed expert witness list. He can still try to put some experts on the stand, but they will have to jump through certain hoops and the Department of Justice can object to their testimony. Despite these setbacks, there is still hope that the 31-year-old can win his case. The trials are expected to last up to 6 months.